Hey, Talkhouse listeners, it's Josh Modell. Instead of a new Talkhouse episode this week, I want to introduce you to an incredible new podcast in our network called States of Independence. It's a brand new show that dives deep into the hidden histories of the world's greatest independent labels with the people who know them best, the founders and their artists for the most part. The first season focuses on the legendary Beggars Banquet, which has its roots in 1970s England, but has become one of the most important and influential labels in the history of music. The first episode naturally focuses on the label's early years, including their first breakout star, Gary Numan. Check it out, and we'll see you next week with a new episode of the Talkhouse podcast.
It began as three friends and a humble record shop.
We had £2,000 each. Steve knew how to buy new records. I knew how to buy old records. And Nick knew how to bullshit.
It ended up as one of the most influential record labels of all time.
Every success that they have, I punch the air.
The fact they're still around is a miracle if you think about it.
Everything that happened in between.
I thought, I've come across something which is going to change music. It's going to change everything.
Well, that's the stuff that legends are made of.
He and I had chemistry that went off the charts. It was iconic, and it changed the world.
And that's when the money got serious, and that's when a whole other level of issues start arising, kids. When you've got FU money, then you start going, well, do I really need this? Do I really like him?
And I went back out and sat on the stage on my own for ages, just looking out at the empty hall and just thinking, what the fuck have you done?
Welcome to States of Independence, the podcast that dives deep into the hidden histories of the world's greatest independent record labels with the people who know them best, the founders who created them.
I did what I had to do. He probably did what he had to do. I have to be the one that won.
And the artists who sustained them.
I always felt I was the best singer of my generation. Any singer that can do what they can do, but better.
I'm your host, Rob Fitzpatrick, and in Season 1 we're going deep into the story of one of the world's leading record companies and the last truly great punk-era independent label still in existence, Beggars Banquet. Birthed in the basement of a West London record shop in 1976, today the Beggars group of labels includes iconic imprints like 4AD, XL, Matador, Rough Trade and Young. There is no other independent music group on earth with a story and a catalogue like this one, and many of their greatest artists, Gary Numan, The Cult, The Fall, The Go-Betweens, The Charlatans, Bauhaus, Love and Rockets, Gene Loves Jezebel, Buffalo Tom, The Bolshoi and more, will all be appearing in this series. Back in the winter of 1989, when I was 20, I got a job at the Beggars Banquet record shop in Kingston, Surrey, and it was there that I got the most incredible musical education. I left in 1996 to make and write about music, but have always remained fascinated by and curiously emotionally attached to the label. So who better as my first guest to start this whole series with than the one person without whom none of this could have happened, the founder and chairman of the Beggars Group, Martin Mills. This is a huge story, and to understand the scope we need to go back 50 years to when Martin and his then partner Nick Austin were mobile DJs playing clubs, bars, weddings and parties. So that's where States of Independence begins, deep in the London music scene of the early 1970s. I think to start, it would be really interesting for you to kind of paint a picture of what you were doing in 1973, 1974, before the shop opened, before the label started. You had the Beggars Banquet mobile disco. What was that world like?
There were lots of different bits of it. I was DJing at the Café des Artistes as well, which was a club in Earl's Court where Hendrix had played once upon a time. So I used to DJ there 2 or 3 nights a week. And we had the mobile disco, which was parties and weddings. And I was working for the government.
Mm.
I was working for the Office of Population, Censuses and Surveys on the reform of the abortion law.
And was that something you were thinking you wanted to move away from? Or
I wanted to move towards music rather than away from anything else. And anyway, the abortion law project I kind of finished and completed. So yeah, that was kind of the end of a role there. It was a kind of 2 or 3 year job. And then working at the record shop, which came after that, was what really got me into the music side of things.
When you were DJing in Café des Artistes and when you were playing in sort of weddings and things like that, what would always be in your record box?
They were things like Brown Sugar and All Right Now, which was exactly what you tried to avoid. And at the Café des Artistes, it was always James Brown.
Right.
But I was always trying to kind of lead people to different places.
Where did you want to take them?
Into all kinds of different things I hadn't heard before, like new tracks. I remember George McRae's Rock Your Baby was a particularly great track when it came out. It was really good for kind of slowing down the tempo and speeding it up at the same time. But, with the benefit of hindsight, it was all trying to turn people onto different music, which is still what I do.
You were also working in the second-hand record shop in Notting Hill at the time, is that right?
Notting Hill and Shepherd's Bush, yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me about those shops.
They were fun.
Was that the Record and Tape Exchange?
Record and Tape Exchange.
Right.
They were run by a guy called Brian Tanklovich, who was eccentric, to say the least. He used to time you pricing second-hand records and fire you if you didn't do it fast enough. And there was a period during which he only hired people who had degrees in primal therapy.
Well, thinking that maybe they could help him in some way.
Maybe. But it was a great little economic model, because every record got priced at the maximum possible price, considering its condition. And every 2 weeks, every price went down by 20 pence. So it's classic supply and demand.
You were also putting on gigs.
Yes, so that started because my partner at the time had a roommate who worked for Premier Box Office, sold tickets. And so that gave us the idea of starting off and putting on shows. And the first one we did was Tangerine Dream at the Royal Albert Hall, which was...
That's quite an impressive one to start with, right?
It's quite ambitious.
I was trying to work out how would someone in 1974 contact Tangerine Dream and book the Royal Albert Hall and make this thing happen? Because it's like, that's basically starting they were a huge band at the time.
I think it was my partner, Nick, was the one who got in touch with the band. The ticket agent was the guy that had the contacts with the Royal Albert Hall. I don't think they had a label at the time. And we just knew there was demand, but the world as a whole did not.
And you knew that from
the shops. From the shops.
Right. But there's a lot of confidence in going, I'm going to book the Royal Albert Hall. I mean, can you remember what it cost to book it? I
can't, but it's expensive. And the margins are very tight there because it's very heavily unionized, I think. And so it's expensive. But I think that was my partner. Nick was very much a kind of go-getter type person. So he used to kind of break down walls to get through places.
You brought over the Crusaders as well, right?
The Crusaders came a little bit later. Very similar. Again, we kind of knew there was a demand from the stores, and there definitely was no label involved there. It was all imports. And we booked them on a 4 or 5 day tour around the UK, going north as far as Newcastle, which was interesting. I've got a memory of when they played Newcastle, the band decided they wanted fish and chips for after they came off the stage. And so whilst they were playing, we found the best local fish and chip shop and went and got them. And we wanted some vinegar. And they gave us vinegar in a Coke bottle because they didn't have a vinegar bottle. And the big fat bass player, whose name I can't remember, when he was eating his fish and chips, afterwards took a swig of what he thought was Coke and got vinegar. But they were great. They were a fantastic band. I mean,
amazing band. What about Dorrie Previn?
She was interesting. Again, very much a project of my partner's. Again, very much someone we knew there was demand for. Didn't have a current label. She wouldn't fly, so we had to bring her over on a QE2.
Of course.
And she was a very fragile flower. Like if there was a little squeal of feedback from the monitors, it would wipe her memory of the lyrics.
Wow.
And she wanted to stay in castles, so we only stayed in castles around the country.
I like the sound of her. She wants to travel on the QE2 and only stay in castles, and there must be no feedback.
And we drove them in Jaguars, two rented Jaguars around the country.
Wow. So around about the same time, have you opened the first shop?
Yes.
And tell me about that. Tell me about the first shop. You had like £5,000 seed money.
We had £2,000 each.
Right.
Yes.
So it's about £40,000 in today's money.
Right. Okay.
What could that get you?
It got us a lease in Earls Court. It got us some stock. There was a third one, Steve Webben, who was an old friend of mine, who had worked at our price, so he knew how to buy new records. I knew how to buy old records. And Nick knew how to bullshit.
Right. The perfect trio, really, isn't it, for a record shop?
And we found this place in Earls Court, which was a good place to be, frankly. It was very much a night place. So we opened at 12 and shut at 10. We used to sell lots of records to Middle East Airlines pilots who used to come in and just say, give me what's new. And we shop fitted the shop ourselves in 2 weeks, actually grew this beard shop fitting the shop and have kept it ever since. And it was a good place, actually. It worked out well, and we were just selling albums. Didn't sell singles in those days.
Was there not really a demand for singles so much, or was that just a choice of yours?
The singles market was a different thing. It was like Mud and Sweet and those kind of things.
And you're not in that.
We weren't doing
you're
that.
Not in that space.
Very much kind of head music. So it was all kind of American West Coast and jazz funk and stuff like that. And the store went really well, and so we got a second one very quickly.
That in Fulham.
And eventually it got up to 6. But it was a lot of fun. We loved doing the shop.
And tell us about the Fulham shop.
Yeah, shop number 2. I mean, we thought North End Road was an absolutely fantastic location because it had the market, it had to go to lots of kind of common people around, but also lots of yuppies buying flats and so on, and houses and so on. So we felt it was a really great natural habitat for music buyers, but we were wrong.
Right.
And the store never did well.
Right.
But what it did do was have a basement, which we turned into a rehearsal studio. And by this point, punk is happening.
So we're into 1976 now.
Yeah, it's late 76. At that point, we kind of stopped doing the promotions because no one wanted to go to concert halls anymore.
We're going back to clubs.
Yeah, and the very last show we promoted, I think, was Graham Parker and the Room at the Victoria Palace, and the Damned was supporting, and John Peel compared it, and that was the beginning and the end of that.
What did you think of punk when you first heard it?
We became aware of it because a van turned up at the shop selling punk singles, American punk singles, so Johnny Thunders, the New York Doors, those kind of things. And that was the Charmdale van, I think, because in those days there was a lot of imports, and the import companies used to go to the airport, get their goods, and then rush off to the record shops to try and get there first and sell them what they had first, which was great. It was fantastic. And that was mainly kind of import, kind of West Coast albums. But then the punk singles started getting mixed in with that. And then the first local punk record that turned out was Nick Lowe's So It Goes and Heart of the City. The second one, I think, was The Clash.
What did you think of it?
It was really exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, Musico got so up its own arse with extended guitar solos and virtuoso playing that it was a real breath of fresh air. And it was astonishing in retrospect how everyone got that immediately. Everyone yesterday were listening to all these extended guitar solos, and then tomorrow it was too many punk songs. Yeah. It was kind of overnight.
Right, so it felt like it was that quick.
Yeah.
It was like just turning a page.
Yeah, and our customers changed, we changed, and suddenly it was all about going down to Red Cow and getting spat on.
Yeah, and who wouldn't want to do that, right? That's the dream, isn't it? Never mind the QE2 and staying in a castle. Yeah. Going to the Red Cow and get spat on.
So we kind of moved out of promotion simply because it was all clubs, and punk bands started rehearsing downstairs, including Generation X, and including the Lurkers, most notably. And it was the beginning of it all. Mike Stone, who was the manager in the shop, he used to work in Earls Court. He'd got a job simply because he lived in Hogarth Road, and he walked past and said, "Can I have a job?" And so since we were opening this shop, we brought him in to manage the new shop. And he started managing the Lurkers because they needed help, and then he needed help, so we started managing them.
Tell us about the Lurkers and when you met them there.
Well, there were 4 guys from Uxbridge who were all called Pete, except one who was called Arturo, but he was really called Pete. And they were a very good 2-chord punk band. They learned a 3rd chord eventually when they recorded the first album. They were very basic. I think in retrospect, you'd probably say they were top of the 2nd division. And we bought the van, bought them a PA system, sent them around the country, and they made a name for themselves.
So, time to introduce you to the very first band on Beggars Banquet. This is Esso from the Lurkers, explaining in his own words just how ridiculous the whole situation was.
We wouldn't have been around if it wasn't for Mike. He had an old Bedford van and he used to take us up and down the thing. And he got Nick and Martin down, but they weren't keen because it was a noise like everybody did.
I think they wanted to jump in on the because people were doing things to themselves. The first thing I did, doing things for yourself. Punk was doing it for themselves, and a few little labels wrote it up, and they thought, well, why don't we have a go? And Mike Stone said, well, we've got just the band to do it. They're a punk band that's coming in. They play sort of. So give them a go. And I think that was what sort of spurred them on to have a go for us. I remember sitting in the rehearsal room when they came down with the contract. There was Nick and Martin came down there and they were going through the whole contract with us. Because we haven't been together that long. Yeah. And we certainly haven't played half as many gigs as even other punk bands. And we were sitting there in the room and Nick Austin's going and says, so we're going to manage you. Then there was the tours around Europe. We planned 3 or 4 albums and hopefully go to America. And I remember sitting there and thought, this is ridiculous. You know, there's people I know in bands who would kill for this. And this has happened to us so quickly. Yeah. And it was great. I mean, it was, the sort of thing you always dreamed of happening. And it happened that quickly for us.
And so the Lurkers became the very first band to release a single on Beggars Banquet Records. Martin and Nick followed that release up with a punk compilation called Streets, put together by a promising young producer called Steve Lillywhite. He'll be popping up a fair bit in this story. Streets also featured the very first appearance of a 23-year-old singer called Mark Hollis and his band, The Reaction, some years before he would form Talk Talk. Meanwhile, the Lurkers were on the up and up.
That must have been really exciting to get your band on top of the pops.
Yeah, it was.
And somewhat surprising.
It was difficult as well, but it was a real it was very mathematical formula for getting bands on.
Tell us
there
about
were certain rules, like you couldn't be on 2 consecutive weeks.
Right.
You had to be going up in the charts, and they started at number 1 and went down as far as they had to fill the show with people who were available. And you had to go and pretend to re-record.
Right.
So the deal was you had to go into a studio to pretend to re-record what you'd already recorded. The guy from the MU would come down to make sure you were doing it properly.
Right.
And you as a record label had to take the MU guy down the pub, and once you did that, the tapes got switched. So the new recording was actually replaced by the original recording. Yeah. Then he gave him that tape and he went off with the original recording.
And he was 3 pints happier and the original tape under his arm.
It was quite stressful, really.
Yeah. Because you'll find the thing that I'm particularly fascinated about all of this is you don't know, how did you know about any of this stuff? Or are you learning about this stuff?
Well, there definitely was no instruction manual.
So you've signed the Lurkers. Mm-hmm. You're starting a record label.
Apparently.
Are you thinking this is a record label, or are you thinking this is an adventure, putting out a record and see what happens?
Yeah, the second of those. Having done one single, we thought, well, that was okay, we could do another one. And then having done another Lurkers singer, we thought, well, maybe we could do another artist.
For Beggars Banquet, the world was always bigger than punk, as their next hit single would prove.
So Ivor Biggin, Doc Cox, the Winkers song, which I sort of remember being about 9, and that was naughty. Right? It was banned, right? Yeah. But you sold 250,000 copies of that record.
I thought it was 130,000
was
actually.
It?
But
maybe that's just like...
But anyway, it was a hell of a lot of records.
That must have been the most amount of records you'd sold of anything to that point.
Yeah, I mean, the Streets had done about 30,000. Lurkers singles probably were doing those kind of numbers as well, but this did 130,000, 150,000. And it just kept on selling as fast as we could press them. And we promoted it at football clubs and things like that. He was a lovely guy, Doc. But of course, the hit we had in the early days was The Doll.
Yes.
Desire Me was a really great single. It was about all they had in them, but it got us our license deal with WEA, which saved our bacon when we were going bust.
Is it true, I must have read this somewhere, probably said by you, that when you signed a deal with WEA, they thought The Doll, that's nailed on hit, but Gary Numan, forget about it.
It was a 2-tier deal. There was a license deal where they did all the work, which were the things they thought were going to be big, and there was a distribution deal, which was out of the playground, where we were allowed to do what we wanted, but we paid for it and we did the work. So Gary was on the distribution side of it because Warner's didn't think it was going to be successful. The Doll was who they thought were going to be big.
With a WEA deal in place and some much-needed funds in the bank, Beggars' new signing was ready to launch. He may not have had much potential as far as Warners were concerned, but Martin saw something in him. You may have heard of him.
My name's Gary Numan, and I make electronic type of music.
Can we talk a little bit about your parents at first? Because you've described them as your saviours, and they were clearly very important in your early development, and they really supported you. So can you tell us a little bit about how did you need to sort of persuade them to do that? Were they just always up for it?
I think so. I certainly didn't have to persuade them. And I think the way my schooling turned out, I think it's all the more credit to them, really. In that there was never any question. And that sort of sounds like I was ungrateful, but I just, the sort of family that we were, my mum's gone now, but people would do something for the other person without question. And it's just always been that way, you know. But anyway, when I was at school, I passed the 11 plus and got to a grammar school. And then I really started to kick up a bit. You know, I decided that I wanted to do music, and as school progressed, school was more and more in the way. And so I really played up and I got into lots of trouble. And that's when the fact that I had Asperger's came out, and because they sent me to child psychiatrists, and because of my behaviour problems at school. And generally speaking, I made a real mess of it. And all I wanted to do was be in music, and I really let them down. You know, I think my mum and dad, when I got to grammar school, thought, you know, pretty much sort of job done, good education, good job. He's going to
We can stop worrying about him now.
Yeah, we can stop worrying about him. And it went the other way.
Yeah.
You know, it went really, really bad. And so they had nothing but worry about me. Constantly going up and down to the school before I was expelled eventually. I ended up going to St Thomas's Psychiatric Hospital unit in London, where I was seen by a lady doctor who I only found out recently became quite famous for her forward thinking and treatment and so on. Anyway, and that's where Asperger's was mentioned. And so, anyway, to cut a long story short, I ended up being a real disappointment. My mum and dad sent me to Brooklands College in Weybridge to like a 5.0 level course.
I know it. Yeah.
Dear.
Yeah.
To try to get something, you know, to end up with just a few A levels or something. And that all went horribly wrong as well. My dad was dropping me off at the station. I was getting on the train. I was going to the college, but I wasn't going to any lessons. I was an absolute idiot. You know, I look back on it with a huge amount of embarrassment and shame. And my mum and dad found out I hadn't been going when the school said, where was I? Because they hadn't seen me for about a term.
Right.
Yeah. And then
just a term.
And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I take in there every morning. You know, said, no, you don't. You don't get there. And so that was the end of it. Mum and dad at that point realised that, you know, schooling just was not for me. And I really wanted to be in music, and I'd already started playing in little local bands, doing cover versions and things like that. And rather than just be angry about that, about what I'd done, and resentful in some way, and sort of want to teach me a lesson, they went the other way, and they just, whatever they could afford and whatever I needed, they paid for it and helped me. And my dad would drive me to gigs and pick me up and help me set up the gear and be security sometimes when it was getting rough.
Was he good at security?
Yeah, it's pretty hard, my dad.
Useful, because
he's a very blokey bloke. You know?
If he was like melted away at the first sun travel, he'd be like,
no, he was straight.
No, he was.
He's not like
almost looking forward to it.
I'm the opposite to my dad in that. I'm like him in many, many ways, but when it comes to that sort of thing, I'd run away at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
He runs at it. I was brought up in that sort of very much love but blokey kind of environment.
Yeah.
So I always found it slightly awkward. Obviously, when I started wearing makeup and things like that, you know, my dad's going to go mad.
Did he?
No, he was all right.
It was kind of part of the thing, right?
Yeah. So he got me a really good. I can't always say he because my dad earned the money, but it wasn't. It was both.
Yeah.
They both made the decisions. You know, not a penny was spent without my mum agreeing to it, and very, very together and everything. They got me a really good guitar.
Got your Les Paul at 15.
Yeah,
right?
Gibson Les Paul. Yeah, 64 gold top. What I didn't realise at the time, when all these sort of lovely things were happening, was that we're spending their entire life savings. I didn't know that until many, many years later, because they didn't tell me. And they spent pretty much every penny they'd saved on getting me gear and so on. I wasn't overflowing with gear. I had a really nice guitar and a nice amp, and they got me a little PA system. They got me a van.
Yeah.
You know, so it was pretty
you were
cool.
set up.
Pretty cool stuff. And they paid for the session that got me ultimately got me to deal with Beggars Banquet.
Tell us about that demo when you're in a punk band.
Yeah.
But you didn't really want to be in a punk band.
No, it was a means to an end, really. The way I saw it, I'd been in this covers band, and then I thought, that's no good for me. I want to be in a band that's sort of really doing something new, different. The punk thing was really kicking off. And so it just seemed to be a real good opportunity. There were new labels springing up all over the place. There seemed to be far less barriers to at least getting on the ladder as such, And so the idea of joining a punk band seemed quite appealing. It made sense to me. I was in a band with my school friends who did 3 gigs and had 3 different names with each gig. And then I was thrown out of that. I wrote all the songs because no one else did. Not because I was trying to grab all the glory, but no one else wrote songs. I wrote songs all the time. So they were doing my songs and some cover versions, Lee Reed stuff. And
why did they throw you out?
Oh, well, because I wrote all the songs.
Right,
so I was taking all the glory.
What
glory?
Yeah.
There's no one comes to the shows.
Yeah.
What glory?
Yeah. We're not quite at the glory stage yet.
Shitty little pub with no one in it. What glory am I stealing from you? You're out all night, getting drunk and shagging girls and doing all that stuff. I'm not. I'm writing songs, because I don't like all that. Because I'm Asperger's, I don't want to be doing that, and I don't drink. Anyway, I turned up at the rehearsal, and as I arrived there, they'd obviously got there early, and someone else was singing. And that's how I found out I wasn't in it. No one even told me.
Right.
Just let me turn up and realise that I'm not in it, and that was the end of that. And then they all stopped talking to me.
Right.
But anyway, so when I got thrown out of that band, I decided that, obviously being at the front and singing was bad. It sort of seemed to cause
led
problems.
to a bad place.
Yeah.
Right?
And all I wanted to do was get some experience. I wasn't trying to take over the world or anything. I just want to get some experience of being in a band and find out what it's like. And so I went for an audition as a guitar player in a band called the Lasers, I think they were called. And got in that mainly because one of the men in it, we just really bonded, really gelled really quickly, a man called Paul Gardner.
Right.
He was a bass player. The others weren't too keen on me, but Paul was, and that was enough when I was in. And then we had, the first rehearsal we had at my mum and dad's house, because it was free. And we sort of doing rehearsals, and it was they were all doing cover versions. I was really disappointed by it. I said, well, don't you have any of your own songs? And he said, no. I said, well, I do. I've got loads. so I played some of my songs. They said, oh, yeah, we do them then. So we started doing them. And at the end of the rehearsal, I said, you're called the Lasers. And so everyone's called the something. I said, why don't we try to find a different name? It's his first rehearsal. I just met him. And everything I said, Paul was going, oh, yeah, that's good. So I had a real good ally, which is helpful. And he said, well, what sort of name do you suggest? And I said, well, I've been writing all these stories. And I listed all the different story chapters. And one of them was called Tube My Army. They said, oh, Tube My Army sounds good. So we ended up being called Tube My Army, doing all my songs at the end of the first rehearsal. Paul couldn't sing my songs, which meant I was the singer.
Right.
So, so much for being the background. I genuinely never intended that. It really was just the way the conversations went during that
I mean, Tube My Army is a great name for a band.
Yeah, it's all right.
I mean, it's really good.
It's all right. It doesn't roll off the tongue quite the way that U2
it's
does.
great, but it's U2 is good on a poster. But
that's how it came about. So we ended up as a band, and then we did gigs fair bit. There was some few sort of lineup changes here and there. My uncle came in and was playing drums for a bit, and then we ended up going to record something, which
because it felt like we need to move this on.
Well, yeah, now
and also capture these songs as they are. Right?
Well, I didn't care too much about that. It was really just to try to get a record deal.
Right.
I didn't think the songs that were anything special. There were silly little 3-minute punk things designed to keep people jumping and just get us out there doing it. So my mum and dad paid for this session. We recorded 3 songs, I think, and then me and Paul took them to the record companies that we knew of. We were intimidated by the majors. They all seemed way too scary to go in. I think we stood outside. I can't remember the label now, but it might have been Atlantic or Polydor, I can't remember, but it's a big label. I remember just we both stood outside it looking up. There's steps to go up to it, big doors, logo, receptionist. It freaked me out. Oh, too scared of that. I felt too small and unimportant, and my music sounded shit now that I'm thinking about it. And they've got all these amazing
they're gonna know.
people, and I've got this silly little cassette. And
Why have you brought us this crap cassette?
yeah. Well, one man said that.
That's nice.
We went to one little label. What was it called? I know it might have been called The Label, actually. One of the little ones that sprung up. And we put the cassette in, and the man ejected it and threw it out the door. Threw it. He said, "You can fuck off after that shit." Whoa, that's pretty heavy rejection.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that was that, and so we pretty much just sort of ground to a halt. Then we couldn't think of any more places to go to that we thought might be interested. We were too scared to go to the big major labels, and so it all just stopped. That was a bit disappointing. And then Paul needed some money, so he went to a Beggars Banquet record shop. We did second-hand album trading and took some albums to sell. He spoke to the man behind the counter, who I think was Steve Webben, and they were just chatting about the fact that we was in a band and couldn't get a deal and the rest of it. Not that we tried super hard. And Steve said, the two men that own Beggars have just started up a little label, so gave the cassette to Steve, and that's how the whole thing started.
This is like late 77, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Paul went into the shop, an event which had a huge impact. I mean, one of the reasons we're sat in this room now, 46 years later, Paul was short of money and needed to flog a few records, which is quite interesting in itself. Had you heard of Beggars? Did you know they had a label? I mean, they'd had a few things out. They'd had a hit, I think, at that point.
No, I didn't know they had I didn't know there was a Beggars Banquet record label.
Right.
I didn't even know they had shops.
Yeah.
I didn't live in that area, so I was completely unaware. So I think Paul rang me up and said, I went into the shop today and I reckon they've got a record label, so I left them a cassette. And I went, oh, all right. And didn't really think much of it at all.
And the rest.
So it wasn't me that got it.
No.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm normally seen as the one that was making everything happen, but I didn't do that at all. That was Paul. And then, again, a little bit vague on the detail, but at some point we went in and talked to them. I remember, I think it was Martin was saying that they'd used all their budget. I think they had the Dole and Johnny G, was it?
Johnny G, yeah.
Someone else. The Lurkers, obviously. Lurkers were the main thing at that point.
Yeah.
And they'd spent, what very small budget they'd had on those bands. And although they liked the record, they couldn't really do anything with it. And so that's when I said, well, we've already got a van. My dad's got us a van. We've even got a little PA system that my dad got, a little Malcolm Hill 1.3 rig. And I've obviously got a guitar. And we've recorded the songs. So all we really need you to do is to make the sleeves and put it out. Sort of thinking I was doing, it's nothing to you, is it?
Yeah.
But that was sort of what seemed to swing it anyway. The fact that we didn't want anything, we just needed the record made, and that was it.
And so would that have been for the first full album?
No, that was
just for the single.
Yeah, I don't remember when we signed. I don't think the deal was signed until February '78.
Right. I
can't remember even what it said, whether it was for an album or 5 or just a single. I can't remember. But that's all I had. I had those 3 songs. We just want this record out, these songs out, and then see where we go from there.
And how quickly did that turn into a thing where you went, I've actually got a record in my hand. This thing exists.
Well, my memory of it is that it came out on February the 10th, 78.
Right.
I think that's right. I remember I was working at W.H. Smith's as a forklift driver until the day it came out, and then I stopped. I think that's what I did. But I always remember being on the dole for a bit. So maybe I quit my job on February 10th to become a professional musician and went straight on the dole. I think that might have been what happened. But how long it was between going to them initially and talking to them and it actually coming out, I honestly don't remember.
In all great stories, and they don't get much greater than this one, there is a moment that changes everything. For Gary, it was when he first met a Moog synthesizer.
So I got all these punk songs, and we get to the studio, and I go in. It was the same studio we did the demo in. So I was knew the man that ran it, Mike Kemp. I went in to sort of say hello and introduce us while the other two were unloading the car. And I'm in the control room, which is a tiny little place, I think it was a little homemade 16-track studio. And sort of studio's that way, speakers there, doors just here. On here, on a little table, really close, is a Mini Moog. Well, I found out it was a Mini Moog. I didn't know that. Yeah. Didn't know anything about synthesizers. I hadn't been madly keen on them, to be honest. I'd heard a few things like Kraftwerk and that, which I thought was all right, interesting, but not enough that sort of turned me onto it. And I want to do that sort of thing. And this synthesizer was sitting there in a case. And I said to Mike, that looks cool, because I'm a real geeky for buttons and switches and shit like that. So he let me use it, just plugged it in and turned it on. I didn't know how to set them up or what any of the controls did. And I'd never played keyboards before. So I just pressed it and it just made the most amazing sound. Yeah. This huge sort of low-endy, growly roar, and the room was shaking and you could feel it as much as hear it. And it was just absolutely changed my life. Fuck me. I mean, it was. I'd experimented a little bit with bringing another guitar player in because I just wanted the guitars to be more powerful. And I remember Martin saying to me once, why do the two guitars do the same thing? That's a waste. I said, it's not about that. You're trying to make it more powerful. Everything. You chew lots of everything. And then you got this little machine that with one finger you could have had 10 guitars. It wouldn't have touched the sides. No, and so that to me, and then you start to twiddle, and you think, it does all this other stuff.
When you're going on your mod wheel and all sorts of weird things happening.
Oh, it was just brilliant. Sort of moving the oscillators, and I took me a long time to even begin to sort of learn them really. But it was fascinating and really, really exciting, and I just. It was a weird thing because there were other people doing it, and I seemed to be oblivious to that. I honestly thought, my argument with Nick when we was in their office talking about this, having done the record, I honestly thought I'd just discovered it. Yeah. Well, obviously I hadn't. It was in the room already. Someone had used it before me.
Someone's come in the week before and gone,
and left it on that sound. Yeah. So I was so kind of weird about it, but that's what I thought. I thought I've come across something which is going to change music. It's going to change everything. And I was saying to Nick, Martin was much quieter during the bulk of the meeting we had. When I took the record back to them, Nick was we were really having a bad argument about it.
So what was was he talking about it from a kind of creative point of view or from a kind of business point of view, or like, this is not what you do? Or
my argument was that the way I felt about it was that this was something that very, very soon everyone's going to know about. Everyone's going to find these things. Everyone's going to be using them. And we have an opportunity at the moment. You have this finished thing which is built completely around this. It's almost entirely electronic. You have the chance, I have the chance, I'm more selfish than doing them a favour, to be obviously, we have a chance here of being at the very front end of something completely different that I genuinely believed would change everything. I didn't think music would ever be the same again. And I said, and you, Nick, what you want me to do is stay playing fucking punk music, which has been dying for the last year. So you want me to stay on the tail end of something that's fading away, so I'll probably fade with it, even though I haven't even got anywhere, as opposed to being at the front end of something which is just about to explode. And I said, you can go fuck. And we stood up to each other, properly childish, standing up, gonna punch someone, really. And it was then that Martin said, why don't we just give it a try?
Right.
Ever the paraphrasing, but why don't we just give it a try and see what happens? So we did they put that record out, which was amazing.
And so what's that like when that comes out for you? How does it make you feel like you hoped it would make you feel, putting this thing out? You're in the pop game now. Right? You're a proper musician with a record out.
I felt that when That's Too Bad, when the first single came out. I can remember sitting at home just looking at it.
Amazing, right?
Like for hours. You sort of kept taking it out, putting it back in the sleeve, and I read every single letter. Unauthorized reproduction. So I couldn't believe it. It was just that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
You know, in a way, that's your dream come true.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens for the rest of your life. And then when the first album comes out, it's very, very similar. It's a very similar vibe. I knew the music was weird and quirky, so I wasn't expecting anything from it. But you just want to put your marker down. You know, I've now done something. I've done something within this sort of new world of music, and it's not as if anyone takes any notice, you know, because you're unknown, but you feel it. You know, you've started something, and it feels good.
And are you pulling away a bit from live gigs at this point, in the sense that you want to kind of change what you're doing? I know when I spoke to Martin, he was sort of saying that you weren't doing as many gigs. You know, you wanted to kind of prepare. You're beginning to think much bigger than just doing these.
Well, when
club and
initially I wasn't. Initially, I just didn't like playing live. We did a gig at the White Hart in Acton with the Skids,
right?
And there was a massive fight, and it was really horrible, really horrible. And I used to get really, really bad stage fright, you know, for days before. I could barely speak, and terrible. And my dad said to me at one point, he said, you know, if you can't find a way of dealing with this is a really bad career choice for you, because you're going to spend the whole life terrified. And so I thought about that. And that's where the idea of images started to come together, and
right.
where the connecting an image with music. And so something that you could become. So rather than you just going out there, you become this other thing, and you hide behind that. And it sounds a bit silly, but
no, I mean that's
works.
You know, there's a fantastic history of performance, is finding the character that you want to be.
Yeah, or was several ultimately.
Yeah,
Gemma says I've got a Gary Numan walk.
Right.
I walk differently, apparently. I don't even know that.
Yeah.
But, so there's this whole sort of different frame of mind that you click into. I don't know if I do it anymore, but I certainly did.
How did you find that?
Don't know. I was always writing stories. You know, the next album, the Replicas one, that was all stories I turned into songs. I was going to write a book. I'm always going to write a book, never done it. So that was a character. I mean, the Replicas album cover was a character called a Mac Man, which was this androidy kind of thing, you know, that looked human but wasn't and didn't feel. And because I had Asperger's, I really related to all this not feeling, because the emotional side of me is different. You know, it's not that I don't have them. It's just that you feel things, you express it differently. Anyway, so Replicas came along very, very soon afterwards.
It was like 5 months later or something.
Yeah, pretty quick.
Yeah.
I was just on it. You know, it's all I did. Didn't go out. Don't think I had a girlfriend. Don't think I wasn't interested. Just writing. That's all I did. And now that you've got a record label and someone that's willing to put out what you make, you know, without having to debate everything and water it down and make compromises, Martin let me do exactly what I wanted. Pretty much the whole time I was there, you know, even when he didn't agree with it, which is rare, very, very rare, to be allowed to just run off, and especially when you're doing something really odd,
yeah,
know, really, really different.
He trusted you.
I don't know. We never really talked about it,
right?
But he allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. So I didn't even appreciate how big a thing that was until I went with other labels later that didn't, where everything was a battle. You know, they would come to the studio and start trying to make changes, and what the fuck do you know about making music? You know, your job is to sell it. I was very harsh, you know, and then many years later I had my own record label and saw it from the other side completely.
Right.
And really, really understood where Martin was coming from for a lot of it. You know, so I've been very lucky, and over the many years I've been doing this, I've been able to see it from pretty much all sides, and have a much better understanding, I think, of the problems and the desires and the pitfalls of all of it. You know, from an artist, from a record company. I was a record company very briefly, and you know, I was very bad at it. Martin seemed unbelievably good at it.
Right.
You know, I was shit. Yeah. I learned nothing from him when I should have done. But you know, he was great. You know, people talk about me being the thing that set up Beggars Banquet, but it's not really true. Beggars Banquet enabled me to be the thing that I became, which helped them. But if Martin hadn't have allowed me to put that first record out, if he hadn't have given me free rein to make replicas, then Our Friends Electric wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't have been able to do what I did for Beggars. Do you know what I mean? It was very much a chicken and egg thing. It wasn't me. Martin made the decision that made it all happen. He did, not me. I just wrote the songs.
And one of those songs was about to change everything again. A song so perfect, so powerful, that 4.5 decades later, it still feels like part of the air that we breathe.
And then he recorded the second album in a studio in Covent Garden. And he did the last bit of it in a studio called Strawberry in Portobello Road. And I remember walking in and him playing me what was the last track recorded for the album, which was Our Friends Electric.
Right.
And I said, that has to be a single. It's just so incredible.
Yeah.
Has to be a single, even though it was 5.5 minutes long and no obvious tune.
Classic single.
It was just, first hearing, it was wonderful.
Yeah. So that's album 2, right?
Yes. It all happened very fast. I mean, there was, I think, only 6 months between the release of the first album and the second album, during which time Warner's had decided to kick in and take it over. So at that point, it had moved from being a distribution to a license with Warner's. We did the picture disc for Our Friends Electric, which was what got it into the charts, because I think it was the second picture disc that had actually been released, the first being The Cars.
Right, The Cars, yeah.
So Warner's were totally behind it at that point. And amazingly, we got him on the Old Grey Whistle Test and Top of the Pops in the same week.
Did you go with him to Old Grey Whistle Test?
Yes, and Top of the Pops.
So they're both in the same week?
Yes.
That's like, this is...
Well, you don't do that. You couldn't be on both of them. Basically, Top of the Pops was pop.
Yeah.
And Whistle Test was rock, and the two didn't combine. So getting him on both was complete.
So like millions of people would have seen it from nowhere.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
And the image was so striking that it completely got people. It just flew, and it went up. Those days, singles went up the charts rather than
just land and then disappear.
And we went up in leaps and got to number 2. And it used to get a chart on a Tuesday morning. In those days, I used to have to go up to WA Broadwick Street to get it. I remember walking in and we knocked Anita Ward, Ring My Bell off number 1.
Right, wow.
And we had a number 1 single before A&M did, who had been going for a lot longer before us. It was a real roller coaster. And he was huge. I mean, we had 3. And then, of course, 6 months later, he released Pleasure Principle and Cars. And that was, we had 3 albums in the top 20.
Which is absurd, right?
Yeah.
But also, during that time, it's not Tube Away Army and it's Gary Numan.
Yes, during that point, he decided to change the name, which he had a huge fight with Nick about.
Because Nick's thinking, you've built up this name, we've put a lot of money into this name, we've told everyone who this is, and now you want to go...
Yeah. No, fair enough, really.
Yeah, but, I mean, if history had gone the other way, you could go, do you remember him?
Yeah.
Should have stuck with Tube Away Army.
But clearly, Gary was very determined and knew what he wanted, so there wasn't any point in fighting it. So we went with it. I'm not sure if that particularly changed anything.
No, because people were so invested in him as he was such a recognisable character.
And he had, obviously in Our Friends Electric and Cars, he had 2 incredible songs. Our Friends Electric, he had as a guitar line, which was basically a mistake. No. There wasn't a note he intended to hit, the second one. And Cars he bought a bass guitar and they picked it up, so he tried out. The first notes he played were da 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 da.
That was a worthwhile purchase, wasn't it? Whatever you spent on that bass guitar, Gary, was you didn't waste your money that day.
Yeah.
So what is it? But what's it like inside the label at this point when you've got this like huge star in the making?
Well, we are completely Gary Numan at this point. We're doing other things, but they're totally dwarfed.
Because nothing's hitting like Gary. So
nothing's hitting for anyone like Gary.
No.
Obviously, Warner's were doing all the heavy lifting, but even so, it was everything we did. We were managing Gary as well, which at that point, he didn't have a manager. So the first tour, we set up completely, and after that, his father started taking over. But we were effectively managing, we were unpaid managers for Gary for a long period of time. We set up the first American tour and all the rehearsals for the UK tour. And so it was everything we were doing. And we became completely synonymous with Gary.
Yeah.
Which was a struggle for us to try and go beyond that and become something else.
Did he take to touring?
Yeah, I think he did. But the very first show he did was after the White Hart in Acton, was in Glasgow, when Our Friends Electric and Replicas were number one, and we flew up to see him in Glasgow. I remember a very, very windy flight. It was Glasgow Apollo, I think. Anyway, the theatre. It was the theatre. 3,000 people, unbelievable, screaming girls. And at the end of it, we were all backstage and just relaxed and saying, that was fun. Then someone said, let's go back to the hotel. We opened the stage door and this absolute avalanche of fans going, and we kind of, security people got us out under the bus and we were driving down the street with fans banging on the window.
So, like, you've got your own kind of David Bowie...
Beatles,
felt
like the Beatles.
Yeah. Which is unlike anything you've had before. There's nothing you've touched before has had this kind of effect on people.
Never near.
No. Did those fans start to appear in your own life?
Not that much. It was all really directed at him rather than us.
And did he must have found that quite difficult to deal with? Because he was only like 21, 22 at the time,
Yeah,
right?
he did. I mean, he used to carry around a baseball bat. And here in my car, I feel safe as fall. That's exactly what he felt.
Yeah, because you can't get at me. How's that for a cliffhanger? To find out how Gary dealt with the incredible pressure of sudden fame, well, you'll have to head straight to episode 2. Thank you for listening to States of Independence, and a huge thanks to both of this week's guests, Martin Mills and Gary Numan. A special thanks also to Leslie Bleakley at Beggars Archive, without whom this show literally wouldn't exist. If you're enjoying States of Independence, please leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, shout it from the rooftops, do whatever you need to do. We appreciate all of it. See you in episode 2 with truly remarkable tales from the heights of Numania and the backlash that followed. Plus, there's a new band from Northampton called Bauhaus, who every other record company in the country has passed on. Meanwhile, a new scene with new technology goes global. Don't miss John Rocker and the incredible story of Brit Electro heroes Freeze.